Jambo, Dr. Kim.
Jumbo.
Jambo, it's wonderful to see you again.
Likewise.
And we're back on our wonderful intercultural dialogues. And this time around, we're going to discuss our trips. You went to Europe this year, and I went to Europe this year. I think, was it this year or last year that you went to Europe?
I went to Europe in October of last year.
Yes, October.
Yeah.
The days are going by really quickly. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
At this point in time, I would like for you to just maybe share a little bit with me and the audience why you went to Europe, and then I will give me a chance to share also why I went to Europe.
Absolutely. Well, in my case, I've been married to my wife for over 24 years now.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And at our wedding, we were talking about where we're going to go for our honeymoon. And we talked about Europe, and we ended up in Hawaii, which was beautiful. But ever since that year, we've been talking about, is this going to be the year we're going to go to Europe? Since that time, I had been to Europe several times for different reasons. But my wife still hadn't ever gone to a single country in Europe. And so this was our 24th anniversary. And we just said, hey, there's never going to be a perfect time to go. Let's just do it. And we spent 3 weeks in the UK, in France, in Switzerland, in Germany, and then Austria. So we went sort of west to east across Europe,
Right.
And it was just amazing.
Mm-hmm. Was that a purposeful? Yes, it was a purposeful decision, but was there logic to it? Was it something that just worked that way, or was it a cultural reason why you went from Paris, the land of Romans, to the other end of it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I just, because this was the culmination of waiting for so many years to do this together, I really wanted it to be a trip that my wife would really enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
And so we visited a lot of castles. She has that romantic streak in her. So visiting a lot of castles, but also spending a lot of time just in local places like little cafes and boutiques. And we did quite a bit of shopping in some of those, particularly in Paris. And so really custom tailored it to what would make her happy and would make it a fulfilling trip for her, something that she'd waited for so long to do. Going west to east, it just made sense to do that because we wanted to fly in to one airport and then fly out of another airport on with two sort of bookends. And just looking west to east, we thought we could potentially go as far as Czech Republic, but we didn't go all the way. And ended up in Vienna and flew out of Vienna. And so, it was a very, very full trip, a lot of traveling. We took the train all the way across Europe. So some long legs on the rail there, but just some beautiful scenery. And everywhere we went, just greeted with such hospitality and experienced so much in terms of the cuisine, the culture, the history of the place, and just the people. Again, the people just being so authentic and warm. I think I've heard in the past some things about some European countries as being a little bit cold, but I didn't experience that at all. And so we just had a fantastic experience.
It must have been such a beautiful trip. And I love that you centered your wife in this conversation. I love that you centered her. And having been on a Korean drama kick lately, I want to say, you are such a romantic, Dr. Kim. And I'm glad that you did that for her. And even though you did that for you, also you did that for her.
Yeah.
Thank you for honoring your wife and centering her in the conversation. The one thing that is super exciting about France is just that whole romance. And I wanted to tie this with that story. I want to keep with the story of romance and Korea. And you're originally from Korea. You're American, through and through. But you have roots in Korea, right?
That's right. My parents are from Korea.
Right.
I was born in New York, in the Bronx. So I did all my education and grew up in the U.S., but my parents are from Korea.
Right.
Immigrated to the U.S. Yeah.
So do you watch any of the Korean dramas?
I do from time to time, and there was a long span where I didn't.
Mhm.
So I did a little bit in college where I sort of reconnected with my roots. I did a study abroad in Korea during college, and so I got reconnected with my Korean roots a little bit. And there was a short period of time there in my college years where I watched some Korean dramas and movies, and then there was a stretch where I didn't. Just busy with professional life and raising a family, and doing ministry, and so they just kept busy with that. I think more recently, as I've been entering into the intercultural space and intercultural studies, have been intentionally looking at films, foreign films, and those include some Korean films as well.
Right. And I know that we have done those together, and I have to say that the romance in the ones that we have seen have been really very interesting romance compared to the K dramas that our young girls are watching and young boys are watching these days.
Yeah.
But I have to be honest with you that in the last few months I have been on a kick for Korean drama.
Oh,
the young ones, yeah.
Okay.
The one with all the sabbiness and the umbrellas and the guy saving the girl.
Okay.
So we can talk about France. Like I feel like Paris is like Seoul or Korea is the France of Asia.
Oh, that's interesting.
So you think romance, you think Asia, you think romance, you think South Korea, you think romance Europe, you think France. So I could not let you get off the hook without bringing that up and just gushing over how wonderful. And just on a side note, I talked with my niece who truly love the Korean movies for the cultural relevance of it. Because as an African born and raised child, there are certain values that the children in Korea or the parents in Korea expect from their children that African parents expect from their own children.
Oh, is that right?
Yes. So that humility, that respect, not raising your voice, and just little things that you do with a lot of respect. And I was having a conversation with her, and I was like, "Oh, I see your Korean crush, or you have on your WhatsApp page," and she's like, "Yes, I'd say I have like 50 of them." And I asked her particularly why are you watching these movies? And she's like, "Auntie, the American movies are just they are different. The kids are very rowdy. I like the Korean movies because they are nice, they are respectful." I was like, "Oh, thank you. I didn't have to tell you that. You learned that on your own." So that is super exciting, and I'm glad that she has that Korean tie and that movie in that movie line. But coming back to our intercultural travels, you do mention that you're getting back into cultural relevance. As you traveled across, were there particular things that really stood out besides the fun and the enjoyment?
Sure. I think again, just amazed at within each country, we tend to, as strangers to a land, we tend to generalize, and it helps us. It's a survival mechanism, right? So we use what Piaget called schemas to be able to understand our world better, and so those schemas are helpful because they help us to navigate, to identify threats, to identify friends, to identify things that are good to eat and things that are not good to eat. So these schemas are helpful and they're essential for human survival. And yet sometimes those very same schemas end up developing into things that are maladaptive, like prejudice and bias, right? And generalization. And so going to each of these countries, and even within those countries, for example, in the UK, we were in London and Oxford, and then even further west towards Bath, and just saw the differences between urban London and the countryside of the Cotswolds, and saw that the people generally look the same. I don't think I would be able to identify one or the other based on where they were living, but in terms of how they spoke, in terms of their lifestyle, in terms of, well, too, we were in Paris again, and then we were in a very small village called Ricquevier. Ricquevier is in the Alsace region, which is an interesting region because everyone in the Alsace region speaks two languages, and not by choice.
Oh, wow.
They must speak two languages because over its history, the Alsace region, which is sort of the border between France and Germany, it's the eastern border of France. It has changed hands between French and German ownership. And so 100 years ago, it was part of Germany. And then 100 years before that, it was part of France. And so the people wake up one morning and realize, oh, today we're speaking German because we belong to Germany now.
Oh, wow.
And then,
Yes.
a couple of years later, now we belong to France. So now we have to speak French. So everyone in that region spoke both French and German fluently. You wouldn't be able to tell the difference between them. And one of the interesting things about another sort of claim to fame for the region and for the particular village that we were in, it's known as Belle's provincial town. So Disney's Beauty and the Beast, Belle sings about growing up in a provincial little town. And so the Disney artists had actually visited Ricquevier in France and had modeled the village that Belle grew up in the film after the buildings that were there. So we woke up and it almost felt like you were in Disneyland to a certain degree.
Exciting.
Yeah, and so it's known for that, and it's known for its white wine. So it's the white wine capital of the world. And so being able to just walk through vineyards and pick grapes from the vine, the vineyard owners gave us permission to do that. Just walking through and just enjoying the fruits of the land and drinking the wine from there. Just an incredible experience. And again, you experience the different flavors in the food and the cuisine, but you experience the different flavors in the culture as well too. And so I think that that's something that struck us is each country we went to, even within the country, people spoke different languages, people ate different foods, people embodied different values. And you saw those both in the interactions, the human interactions we had, but you also saw it in the symbols. You saw it in the architecture. You saw it in the ways that the roads were constructed, whether they're straight lines or circles or curves. So there are differences that we are often unaware of, that if we're not looking for them, we don't realize that even within a country, there's a lot of diversity. Within one culture, there's a lot of diversity. And so I think that's, again, just being reminded that when I'm in Asia, I can see the differences between the different Asian countries. So from a Western perspective, a lot of the Asian countries feel the same and they get lumped into one group. I would say the same for Africa. I think Westerners look at Africa and say, if you ask them, what country did you visit? Oh, I visited Africa. And Africa is not a country, right? It's a continent, right? And so there's these generalizations we make and we lump people together. And I think it was a good reminder to me that even Europeans themselves, it's easy to sort of, because when we live in America, we often don't distinguish between French and British and German immigrants. They all sort of get lumped together as sort of the European group or the white class, right? And so we don't make those distinctions. And so when I go to Europe, I wasn't looking for those distinctions, but those things became very evident to me just by virtue of being there for a few days. And so again, if you have eyes to see and if you have ears to hear, you will note those differences, and they will be stark. They're actually very evident and very obvious if you're open to it.
That's one of the reasons why I truly enjoy travel, because people don't realize that when you go on a vacation, you're also going on a learning trip, right? That's right. And you pick up all these things and you learn all these things unconsciously. You're not purposefully with a pen and paper saying, I'm going to be learning these things today. You're learning it as you go. You're learning it through enjoyment. And you're resting, but you're learning. And that, for me, is one of the biggest reasons I travel. For instance, I traveled to, I did the Australia trip in October, which October, which you know about. And that was my big trip that I wanted to do for a lifetime. I wanted to go to the Outback. I didn't get to do the Outback, which I was very disappointed about that. But I was still able to interact and engage and do the touristic things. But I was happy that I was there. And a native picked me up and we just drove the entire day. We went from one spot to the other and just showed me all of the city of Melbourne, which is small. So we literally drove around it. The things I picked up was just, if you had asked me about Melbourne, I would have not I would have said, oh, Melbourne is maybe more native, indigenous people. That's what they like being called, which is something I had to learn also. Indigenous peoples. So I thought I was going to see more of the indigenous people. I didn't see. I don't think I probably saw one when I went to. No, I saw one indigenous person. Yes, basically for my entire trip, I probably saw one person that I was like, oh, this is an indigenous person. And that was actually in Sydney, not even in Melbourne. So I was a bit disappointed by that, but I would have not known that had I not traveled to the country. Beside that, just learning how far things can be, even though I think, oh, maybe it's closer for me to go inland and go to the outback. It's more complicated than it looks. So I didn't do the outback because it was a bit more complicated than it just sounded. Now for my Europe trip, which happened recently, that trip I call my mental health trip. I needed a break and I decided, I'm going to go somewhere else. I'm going to just go somewhere else that is not in Cameroon. Because in Cameroon, and as a native or a native of that land, there are complexities that come with it, especially if you're trying to rest. There are complexity.
That's right.
To truly rest, you gotta go somewhere where you can rest. But when you go,
when you go home,
home, it's
family expectations.
Yes.
People to meet.
Yes. And we love them. We love them. It's not because we don't love them, but we need to rest. So I called up a couple of people that I called one person that I know, and I connected with another person, and they gave me free housing, and I was able to just relax. And I had the thing that I picked up when I was talking to one of the ladies I was trying to set up a place to stay with. I said to her, hey, I'm looking for a place, a town with internet. When I talked about the town, I wasn't thinking, I was thinking city, town, and town to me was just a little place where you can have internet, cafe, and things like that. And I didn't realize that they literally call it village. Right. So when I said town to her, she was like, "Oh, sorry, it's not a town. I know you were expecting a city, so the day she picked me up. I hope you were expecting this, but this is just a small village." And I was like, "No, actually, this is perfect. That's exactly what I meant." She kept up on this, and I'm like, "No, this is exactly what I meant." So now I know that if I'm going to Ireland, I can say village. I don't have to say village just because I'm in a village in Africa, right? I can say village when I am in Ireland. And that was a solid lesson for me. It seems small, but it was a very solid lesson for me, because if I had known that, I could tell her that I'm looking for a space that is like a village, it's quiet, there isn't a lot of people, there's no traffic, I just want to be with nature, then I would have just said to her, "No, village." But now I know if I'm going to go anywhere in Ireland, I'm going to say, okay, I want to be in Dublin, which is city, or I want to be in Belfast, which is city, or I want to be in Cork, which is city. But if I want to be in a village, I'm going to think about going to Kilmore, Kilmockridge, which is always south and that southeast corner of of Ireland. And another leadership thing that I really picked up that I didn't quite know about was Ireland being 4 provinces, but still being one of the provinces being a part of the UK. And so I kept saying, I want to go to Southern Ireland. And the Southern Irish, the people were like, no, we don't say that. We don't say that. We don't say Southern Ireland. We say Ireland, just Ireland, or you say the Republic of Ireland. So so it took me a minute, and I had to learn that quickly. And I now I know that when I say Ireland, I actually mean the Republic of Ireland, or the entire Ireland landscape. It was really, really exciting to be there. It was very restful. Very green. It felt like a marriage between nature and city and city, because civilization is not the right word, city. Modern day developments. It was just nice to always look out the window and see trees, landscapes, instead of just tall buildings. So I found that to be very, very helpful. Then traveling, I basically traveled across the entire. I did like zigzag across the country. So I went from Belfast to Kilmore Ridge, from Kilmore Ridge to Court to Galway, which Galway is called the capital city, the cultural capital city, right? So I was there. It's not that big, but I enjoyed the time being in the museum. The museum in that place was amazing. The historical layout, and I learned so much just reading. I basically was reading everything,
Right.
even though it was a trick for me to just unwind, relax, get my brain off the computer, get myself off the phones, and just deal with nature and deal with my own thoughts and deal with my own mind.
Yeah.
Get to a place where I'm healthy, because I think as leaders sometimes we forget to take care of ourselves.
That's right.
We just keep going, and we get burned out, which it's not good. You can lead effectively when you're constantly going and getting burned out.
Yeah.
And I was definitely burned out. I remember one of the days was reflecting, and I was so grateful that I took the trip, and the people that poured love into my life, that I couldn't help but just cry. And it wasn't cry tears of sadness, but just tears of gratitude and just rest. And even my friend said, look, you look so rested. I was like, yes, the big bags under my eyes are kind of gone. And then I had to come home. And I had to come home. But I picked up so much from being at the museum and the history. Like the troubles, I didn't know what the troubles were, and it was that constant rebellions that they did.
That's right.
And the troubles was the most recent ones, and I liked that they even called it troubles. Like, just saying that there was almost another unrest and civil war or something, or trying to get back the people that once the Northern Ireland to become part of mainland Ireland, right? So there's still that conflict till today. And even my host that I stayed with, said that he almost died in in the troubles. Right? I think the troubles was in the 80s. Really soon.
That's right.
And he almost died in the troubles. And he's very upset about it.
Yeah.
And I will be very upset too.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't think that he prefers things to be the way they are, but there are people that don't. So he almost got caught in that crossfire.
Yeah.
I've been going for a minute.
That's good. No, that's really good stuff. I think even though you're going on vacation and going to rest, you have a cultural perspective and a cultural lens that you can't turn that off. And so wherever you go, you are seeing all the colors and you are tasting all the flavors. And I think that that's something that's a gift. It's something that is, I wouldn't call it unique, but I think it's very rare. And so I think you're both very blessed, but also you bless others with your cultural insights as well.
I hope so. I truly enjoy it. I truly enjoy it. And it's very odd to think that I am going to jump around Ireland from one place to the other and actually feel rested. And a lot of people would be like, I am so tired. But instead, oh my gosh, I spent 2 nights in a hostel. And even then, I still was okay. You know? And I think when it comes to travel, you push yourself every time, right? Like even for an older person like me, again, these are things that people do when they're in college. I'm doing some of these things in my older age, but at the same time, I'm enjoying every moment of it. And I'm pushing myself. It's not so easy. Like when you're doing it, you're on there, you're taking beautiful pictures, you're doing that. But there is anxiety when you're planning this trip. Like especially as a solo female traveler, there is anxiety when I plan the trip. And I always say to myself, just because I'm a bit scared of the unknown as I venture out, it doesn't mean I shouldn't do it. And that really also helped in other areas of my life. Like when you do that, take that chance and go to Ireland and somebody that you met at an airport once, and all of a sudden you're going to go stay with them. Or somebody you met on Facebook, and all of a sudden you're going to be spending 5 days with that person who've never seen you. Those are things that you don't just do easily, no matter how.
It takes risk.
Yeah, you're taking some risk when you're trying to integrate into other people's culture or learn from other people or be involved in other people's local environment. There's going to be some degree of risk. You know, when you go on vacation, the degrees of risk. Am I gonna get pickpocketed? Is my plane gonna get delayed? Will that country? Will I be good with the language? Things like that. Like there's just so many things there.
Yeah, and I think that your audience really needed to hear that, because you're such a world traveler and you're so comfortable in different cultures, and you've been to so many places that I think you being vulnerable with your fear and the anxiety that you have preparing to go and going, I think that's something that all of us experience. And I think it's helpful for us to see, oh, even Dr. Akumbu experiences some of this, but she goes and she has these amazing experiences, right? Yeah. What's one thing that you experienced that was not what you expected?
I didn't, for some reason, which I think the African audience might be interested in, is the fact that when you come from a village, a black girl from a village in Africa, right? You think about village as that place where most people don't want to be. They want to go to the city. They want to go to the city. I think the one thing that really stood out to me from that perspective was being in Kemok Ridge, the village of Kemok Ridge, being there and still seeing life happening almost as if it was a small city, right? Like when I think village, I think I'm going to buy my food from the side of the road, and I'm going to do this. And I quite didn't know what to expect because when I looked at the map, I'm like, this is exactly where I'm going to be, like that far, and like just by the Irish Sea, I'm just going to be over there, like. It's going to probably be like 5 people in that village. It was a bit more than 5 people in the village. I walked on the roadside and people would drive by and they would call my friend. They'd be like, is that your friend walking down the street? So yes, there's still that small town mentality there, which I appreciated. I didn't expect, but I appreciated because knowing that people were seeing me on the street and it could exactly tell that it's the friend of that person that is in town. Yeah. So I didn't expect that level of communal living. Another thing that even though I didn't expect it, that stood out to me and that kind of made me think why I'm like, African villages are not so different from these villages. That was my thought. African villages are not so much different. It's just maybe the way they build their houses that makes it different. It's the fact that their roads are paved, right? Like you can drive on a paved road to the house. Right. I'm like, in my village, when I was growing up, if my road was paved and I just had a little bit of a nicer house, there would be no difference. There would literally be no difference between me being there and there. So it's like, I think about it, I'm like, okay, somebody leaves from Africa and then they go and live in Kemok Ridge. And it's almost like, oh my gosh, you're abroad. Okay, but they're still living on the farms. There's maybe still more to their house because the paved road is just part of it. And there's still just some similarities that are there that are still the same from your life in that African village. Yeah. So for me, it really did something internally to say, when I was there, to say, okay, I can always go to any other African village and I would just always remember that the only things that are missing are probably a good road and maybe a little distant store down the road, right? Like those amenities that are necessary for a healthy life. And once you have that, no matter where you are in the world and you're comfortable, you're at home, you're paying your bill, it doesn't matter because that village in Kemok is not so different from another village, except the governance is probably better, the hospitals are probably close by, the roads are tarred, there's more cleanliness.
Yeah.
The dustiness of Africa is different from a country like Ireland that is constantly wet and there's always rain, right? So for that, on that note, that is one thing that really shifted my mindset as far as village life is concerned, and village of African village to village in a European small town.
Those are some neat insights. Yeah, I can see that, some of the things that are artificial, man-made, those things might differ between different cultures, but what you're saying about village life in terms of its sense of community and commitment to one another, their willingness to come alongside and to help others in need, a more pastoral lifestyle, more closer to the earth and more connected to the earth. I can see those basic values being applied to villages in any country, really. And I think that that's what you were going for there, is seeing that there are things that we have in common, regardless of what our skin looks like or what our country is called. That there is something very similar about the countryside and living in a setting like a village.
Right. I agree. Thank you for summing that up.
No, it's beautiful.
I agree. I wanted us to touch a little bit on when you think Europe and its influence in the world in general. We know its influence in Africa. We know its influence in Asia. We know that just its influence even here on the continent of America. It's not. We all understand colonialism. We all understand post-colonialism. We all understand how by the British going into, say, India and all these other countries, Cameroon, Nigeria, or Ghana, the kind of footprints, right? Like, what do we say these days? Like your internet footprint, like they left their own footprint. And sometimes you don't see the footprints immediately in the countries that they were, because a lot of the things were moved into museums, right? So I'm thinking about this from this perspective that they came into this country, yes, they left. You could see the religious influences, you could see the language influences, and you could see other influences. But when you go to their countries, you can see the influences of those other countries also in their own countries, right? And you could say, okay, you go into a museum. Why are there so many African statues in statues in British museums? Right? You start thinking about things like that, and you think about, you don't see African type buildings there that you do in a museum. I don't quite understand what is there. Anything else that you could have taken from the people of Africa, Asia, and all of that and brought back to your country that could have made your country better? Well, they did take slaves, so be dangerously close. I can't just say they did take that and they helped in that regard. But the fact that I quite don't understand why they have all the statues. Right? Like, I keep saying that word, please correct me. I don't get it. Like, why is it that they just looted all of this statues from these so-called primitive people, and they're all sitting in the museums? Right. That for me is something I don't quite understand. I haven't put my mind on it, because I don't know at the time, was it really that financially valuable? I know that when they go exploring, you go out to explore so that you can bring something back. And was it really that valuable? I don't know. Have you ever thought about this? Because I'm just like thinking about this now. And thinking as we go, like, why were you taking all these African people statues? What was it?
Well, visiting museums in the US, I think we oftentimes do it unreflectively, and we just wonder, and we come at it with a sense of deep curiosity and appreciation for the cultures of the world. So I'm not sure why it struck me so deeply when I was in London, in particular at the British Museum. And the British Museum there has a section on Egyptian antiquity,
Mm.
and they had statues that must have weighed tons. I mean, sphinxes that were probably the size of buildings, and um, they actually had walls of entire temples that they had taken apart and had reconstructed in London. And I thought, wow, there is so much, not just art, but just the physical land and the physical product of the land. There's so much of that in this museum. And just wondering what that means to, for example, say an Egyptian coming from their home country and seeing this in a British museum. And I know that there are a lot of museums that are now working towards repatriating artwork and cultural heritage. And so I know there's a lot of effort, but I don't see that the sort of the great museums of the world, wherever they might be in Europe or the US or anywhere else, I don't necessarily see them returning the majority of what they have procured or have directly just taken from these other peoples and these other countries.
Mhm.
So I think that to a certain extent, the whole question of, you mentioned neocolonialism, but the whole question also of just appropriation, and sort of calling this our museum, the British Museum, and a place that we own, and we own everything in it, and this belongs to the people of Britain. There is something, I think, that something there that could be offensive to people from whom those things were taken. So I reflected on that a lot. And then I think you mentioned also what influences came back with the colonizers when they came back to their home countries, to their mother countries. And one of the things that I really enjoyed in Europe was just trying different foods.
Right.
But as I went to different places and tried different foods, so having Earl Grey tea in London is just different than having the Earl Grey tea bags that we have in the US. Enjoying Italian pasta or pizza, or having a cappuccino, or having a gelato. Those are all just amazing things that I'll remember about my trip and our time there. But each one of those foods that I've just mentioned didn't come from those countries. So if you think about Earl Grey, which is quintessentially British, right?
Right.
Its distinctiveness, right? The flavor that's distinct to Earl Grey comes from bergamot oil, and it actually originates from Southeast Asia.
Oh, did not know that.
Yes, and the tea leaves themselves, most of them that make up Earl Grey, are sourced from India, right? And so what we call British Earl Grey is actually Indian and Southeast Asian tea. We just don't call it that. We call it Earl Grey because obviously it belongs to the British now, right? So when you're having pasta, Italian pasta, and if you think about Italian food, what do you think about? You think pasta, right? It's a staple of Italian cuisine, and yet, it's Marco Polo that was credited in a lot of sources, scholarly sources. Marco Polo was credited for bringing back noodles from China, from the time that he spent there, from particularly from Suzhou and Hangzhou, when he was there, bringing that back to Italy, and then that evolved into the pasta that we know in Italy.
That's incredible.
Right, and so when you're eating pasta, you're eating Chinese noodles, right? And then pizza, right? I mean, if you think about pizza, I mean, obviously there's the bread and there's the cheese, but what's pizza without the tomato sauce, right?
Right.
And tomatoes are not native to Europe. Tomatoes were imported from the Americas. So you're thinking 1600s, right? So pizza didn't exist the way it looks today. It didn't exist until the European powers came and sort of took, right, from the Americas, not only their land, but the produce from their land, and took it back and reintroduced it and introduced it back to the old world.
Right.
And so we have pizza. The version we have today is because its primary ingredient is actually Native American.
Wow.
If you think about cappuccinos, right? like the quintessential sort of Italian drink, cappuccino, those coffee beans are not from Italy. Those coffee beans were originally from Ethiopia. They're from the African continent.
Yes.
So when you're drinking a cappuccino, you're drinking Ethiopian coffee with some milk in it, you know? You know,
So true.
there's so many examples of this, right? And there's a certain level of cultural appropriation that's not credited, right, to its original source. And I don't think it's wrong for us to see cultural syncretism happen, because it happens both directions, right? So you see foods from every single culture mixing with other cultures. There's nothing wrong with that. That's natural to do. But I think for certain foods to be advertised as being sort of quintessentially from a country, and yet not crediting the origin of that food, I think does a disservice, both to the country of origin, but also does a disservice to the country that has taken taken that and has appropriated that as their own, because there's a level of inauthenticity in that. And so I think that's something that I reflected on as I was traveling, just enjoying the foods and thinking, oh wait, where does this food come from? And it's actually not British, or it's actually not French, or it's not actually Italian. It doesn't come from here. And so just the recognition that, like you said, Ubuntu, we all belong to one another. I am because you are. And I think that's very, very true for culture, for food, for art, for all of these things that we sometimes assume are ours, but actually they're ours because they were others first. And that, yes, that we need to give credit where credit is due.
I love that, because for instance, Irish potatoes. Every time they made potatoes in Ireland, my friend took me to her sister's home, and they made potatoes. And I was like, oh, Irish potatoes. Then I was like, oh, I'm in Ireland and I'm eating Irish potatoes, because that's all from the time I was born and I started eating Irish potato, I was taught that it was from Ireland. So it's nice to get there. Like potatoes now, that potatoes now is everywhere, right? Everybody, America, we call American people meat and potato people, but Irish potato is like Irish, and we all know and respect the fact that it belongs to that culture. We're not saying you can't have it, you can have Irish potatoes because it belongs to Irish people, but it's like, can you at least give credit where it's due? And if we can do that with a lot of things in society, that would be really helpful. That way, if you're looking at one culture and thinking they have nothing to offer, meanwhile you're actually building off of what they created. So it's very, very nice that's a really nice example, and that you brought up, and it just made me think about Irish potatoes.
Absolutely. So.
One thing that stood out to me is religion. I would like for us to kind of like touch on religion, like when all these influences. And as I walked through the museum in Galway, one of the things that really stood out, and my host in the north took me around and showed me some little areas and gave me a little bit of the history of the religious conflicts that they had. And the thing that stood out to me was Ireland is Protestant Catholic. The northern side is mainly Protestant, and which is one of the reasons why they are part of the UK. And the rest of the country is Catholic. And it made me think, was Catholicism the original religion of the place, right? Because the way they are fighting, for example, we walked down the street, and he said, Ruth, you see this side of the street? That's the Protestant side. You see this side of the street? That is the Irish side. So where in those days, and even now, when you're on this side, you know that you're going to deal with all Catholic people. When you're on this side, you deal with, and they say they used to stand in the intersection down towards the intersection, and they will haul insults at each other. right? They would just call each other.
And they're neighbors, right?
Yes, yeah,
So.
literally across the street from each other. And then one will start over there, the other will start over there. They just all inside of each other. Like, what is going on? And then we were making the joke. It was like, okay, today we're going to just walk down.
Yeah.
And when you're in Ireland, you're going to enter a pub, whether you like it or not. So we're going to walk down and we're going to go to a pub.
Yeah.
On the Protestant side. I think we went on the Protestant side. And the Protestant side, yes, we did go on the Protestant side. Because it's like, and with the wife, so every time they would say that, I would say, oh, you're trying to start a war with your wife, aren't you? Because the wife is Catholic and he's Protestant.
Oh, no.
And I was like, it must have been really challenging for you guys.
Yeah. Romeo and Juliet.
Yes, in that sense.
Yeah.
And we think about all the divides that we have in the world, things that divide us.
Yeah.
To think that in a country like Ireland, religion is one of the big things.
Yeah,
and and Catholicism wasn't even the baseline Irish religion. If you're really looking back and going down, it's not even their baseline religion. That is influences of war and empire building and colonization and all of that, right? And now it has become such an identity that they can fight over, that they are literally fighting over something that they had gotten from another place. Not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing, like using this religion as an example of the things that we adopt and then we hold on to it. It becomes such a big part of our identity that we start to fight and we forget to know that we had received this from some other place too, and sometimes freely, to say the least. So that part of the religious struggles of Ireland, that part of their culture, that part of their history, really stood deep in my heart and on my mind, because I don't think I necessarily expected that. I didn't know that deep religious roots and that deep religious divide between the Protestants and the Catholics, and how it influenced life and politics of the country as a law as a whole. So that for me was incredible. It was incredible.
I wonder if you saw any parallels between what you saw there and between the Christians and Muslims in a lot of African countries like Nigeria, where your next door neighbor is Muslim and you might be Christian, and kids might go to the same school even, but and sometimes they get along and sometimes there's violence there, to the point of civil war. And so I wonder if you were drawing some of those parallels as well.
Yes, and I think that's why it hit hard. Right? It hit really, really hard, because when I reflect back and I think about the people that have died because of religion, and then I think back and I say, all of you all also had your own religion, and you got welcomed into another religion, and now you have embodied that other religion to the point where you're actually killing each other, right? Because you're both locals.
That's right.
Like you're most like, I grew up in a town like that. I grew up.
Oh, you did?
Yes, my little village is Babanki Tunga. There's two Babanki. There's the big Babanki, which is the original group of my tribe, and then another group of people that moved away from the original group and started another village, just a little bit away from the big village. So we also have our chief, so we're a sovereign village, even though we speak two languages across two different land spaces. So we started there, and then another group of people came in, the Fulanis. They came in, the Mororos and the Fulanis, they came in. Later down the road, they migrated into that region, and our chief at the time was willing to share the land with them. So we shared the land with them, and the times where we will have really a bit of a religious tension. But it will kind of go into land. It will be like land disputes, because they've lived there long enough now that they claim it, right? And but sometimes they claim it, and it almost feels to the village people, the original village people, like sometimes they don't want to share. So the conflicts begin,
Yeah.
and conflicts will go into the land, but it also would be that whole almost superiority complex thing, as in we're better than you, we are this Muslim group, we are this group. So you could see not tribalism in a sense, but you could see that little bit of religious superiority happening because of that. Or sometimes if they're the lighter skinned rural people, sometimes you could almost think that some of them no longer have played, most of them are like my brothers and sisters. It feels sometimes that they think they're better, but one tribe can always think they're better than another tribe, right? So it doesn't end only in skin color, it goes down all the way down to tribe and religion. So when I saw that in Ireland, and I heard the hauling of, even in Belfast, we drove down the street, it was the same thing. They said, on this street, this was the site of the Protestants, this was the site of the Catholics. The same thing in that particular street. So it was a very common thing. And then I'm like, okay, Africa, that's exactly what is happening with you guys. Look at North Africa, the map, the Christian Muslim map. You look at it, you can see it. You can literally see the divide on the African map, where you see majority, and then you see this part. Even though Islam is scattered in between in small pockets in these places, but the divide is quite there, and it gets vicious, as we see in the case of Nigeria. And it just, like I feel like I'm repeating myself, but it really bothers me in the sense that Christianity, for example, was supposed to be a peaceful religion. Like Abrahamic religions are supposed to be peaceful, and Christianity and Islam are Abrahamic religions. They're supposed to be peaceful. How do we get to a place where we think that we need to kill each other because we think our religion is better? Are we all trying to go to heaven? And if you think that your way is the only way, and your Bible tells you, or Quran tells you, like, convince people, help people to enter heaven, why should you kill somebody that doesn't want to enter heaven?
Right. It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
To the point where you divide countries,
That's
you divide people, you divide families, you divide. You cause so much harm in the name of religion. It makes no sense.
Well, there are important voices like yours that are speaking into this and doing the work of cultural empathy, because I think as long as we see each other as the other, right, as the alien, as the enemy, there won't be progress on that front. We will continue to alienate, we will continue to isolate, we will continue to talk about in group and out group, we will continue to draw lines and borders, and we will continue to create systems of disparity and injustice that then give rise to violence. And so I really appreciate what you're doing, the work you're doing around the world, and the work that you're doing more specifically through the nonprofit work that you do, through the education work that you do, through the entrepreneurial work you do, all of that. I just see you bringing people together. And so I just want to appreciate you and appreciate the chance to have this discussion with you today.
Oh, thank you so much. And I highly value you, and I'm so grateful that you've given me your valuable time. Like, having this deep conversation, I can sit here and spout this thing all by myself to the microphone and to the world, but it's nice to have somebody bouncing thoughts together and engaging in dialogue, right? Like these intercultural dialogues are really important. And thank you for your wealth of knowledge and being open to explore from Africa to Asia to Europe.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
All right. We will do this again soon.
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you.
All right. Bye now.